The marble halls of the Palatine Palace gleam under torchlight, their polished floors reflecting shadows that dance like ghosts. It's 39 AD, and the greatest empire the world has ever known kneels before a monster wearing a laurel crown. Inside the throne room, Senator Valerius stands rigid, his face drained of color, his hands trembling at his sides. "Bring her in," Caligula says, his voice soft, almost bored. The doors open, and guards drag in Valerius's wife, Claudia. She's weeping, her silk stola torn apart, her carefully arranged hair now disheveled. The senator's jaw clenches, but he says nothing. He knows better. In Caligula's Rome, silence is the only shield left to the powerful. The emperor rises from his gilded throne, descending the steps with predatory grace. He circles Claudia like a wolf examining prey, his fingers trailing across her shoulder. "Your wife is beautiful, Senator," he murmurs. "I've decided I'd like to borrow her for the evening." Valerius's knuckles turn white. "Of course, divine Caesar," he whispers, the words like ash in his mouth. Around the throne room, other senators watch in frozen horror, their faces masks of enforced neutrality. This isn't the first time. It won't be the last. Caligula has made sport of humiliating Rome's elite, of shattering the dignitas, the honor that defines Roman manhood. To refuse is treason. To resist is death. Caligula smiles. It's the smile of a man who knows he's untouchable, who understands that absolute power means absolute depravity. Rome thought they crowned an emperor. They unleashed something far worse. If you believe that the documented horrors of history's most depraved rulers must be remembered, consider liking this video and subscribing. Your support unearths more accounts from the darkest corners of history. Now, back to the man who made cruelty his legacy. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear gets worse, much worse. And by the end, you'll understand why Rome celebrated when his blood finally stained the palace floors. Caligula was born in 12 AD as Gaius Julius Caesar, the son of the beloved general Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder. His childhood nickname, Caligula, meaning little boots, came from the miniature soldier's uniform he wore while accompanying his father on military campaigns. The legions adored him. Rome loved his family. But love in the Roman Empire was a death sentence. When Caligula was 7, his father died under suspicious circumstances, likely poisoned on orders from Emperor Tiberius, who saw Germanicus as a threat. His mother and 2 older brothers were arrested, accused of treason against Tiberius. Agrippina was exiled and starved herself to death. His brothers were imprisoned, one forced to eat stuffing from his mattress until he died, the other driven to suicide. Caligula survived only because Tiberius kept him close on the island of Capri, a gilded prison where the old emperor indulged in depravities that would make your skin crawl. For 6 years, young Caligula lived in Tiberius's villa, watching the emperor torture and murder on a whim, hosting orgies that violated every Roman taboo. He learned that power meant freedom from consequence, that emperors weren't bound by laws or morality, that the strong did what they wanted and the weak suffered what they must. Suetonius, the Roman historian, wrote that even then, the world never had a better slave or a worse master. When Tiberius finally died in 37 AD, possibly smothered by Caligula himself or the Praetorian prefect Macro, Rome erupted in celebration. The nightmare of Tiberius's paranoid tyranny was over. The Senate declared Caligula emperor, and the people welcomed him with genuine joy. He was 24, handsome, the son of their beloved Germanicus. Surely he would restore Rome's glory. For 7 months, Caligula seemed to justify their hope. He recalled exiles, released political prisoners, put on spectacular games, and distributed money to the people. Rome breathed easier. The Senate relaxed. Then, in October 37 AD, Caligula fell seriously ill. Perhaps encephalitis, perhaps poison, perhaps something worse. For days, he lingered near death while Rome held its breath. He survived. But the man who rose from that sickbed was not the same man who had fallen into it. What emerged was something Rome had never seen. An emperor who understood he was untouchable and decided to prove it in the most horrifying ways possible. Caligula didn't just abuse power, he weaponized it, turned it into performance art designed to shatter every Roman value, every social contract, every illusion of dignity that held the empire together. The first sign came during a theatrical performance. Caligula, seated in the imperial box, noticed a senator's wife in the audience, a woman named Livia Orestilla, recently married. He sent guards to fetch her in the middle of the performance, took her to his private chambers, and returned her hours later. Days after, he divorced his own wife and married Livia in a public ceremony, forcing her new husband to attend and smile. Within months, he divorced Livia too, claiming she was inadequate in bed, and exiled her. Her first husband, the senator who'd been forced to watch his wedding become a joke, never spoke publicly again. This became Caligula's pattern. He would summon senators to dinner parties, surrounded by their peers, and openly discuss which of their wives he'd most recently bedded, critiquing their performance in explicit detail. He forced them to laugh, to toast his prowess, to thank him for the honor of sharing their wives with a god. Because Caligula had decided he wasn't just an emperor, he was divine, a living god who could do anything he pleased. Roman historian Cassius Dio recorded that Caligula established a brothel in the palace itself, staffing it with the wives and daughters of Rome's noblest families. Senators were forced to bring their female relatives, watch them be used by Caligula and his friends, and then pay fees for the privilege. The money went to the imperial treasury, a sick joke that turned Rome's elite into pimps of their own bloodlines. Those who refused, their property was confiscated, their families were exiled, some simply disappeared. But Caligula's depravity wasn't random cruelty. It was calculated destruction. He understood that Roman power rested on dignitas, the concept of personal honor and family reputation. A senator's authority came from his lineage, his virtue, his ability to protect his household. By systematically violating senators' wives and daughters, Caligula didn't just humiliate individuals. He shattered the entire foundation of Roman aristocratic power. he proved that their dignitas was a fiction, that their authority existed only because he allowed it. The Senate was paralyzed. To plot against Caligula meant risking torture and execution. To resist his demands meant watching your family destroyed. So they smiled. They applauded. They voted him divine honors, declared him Jupiter incarnate, built temples to his godhood. They debased themselves completely, hoping that submission would satisfy him. It never did, because Caligula had learned the most dangerous lesson of absolute power. There is no bottom, no limit, no act too depraved if you're untouchable. And he intended to prove it over and over until Rome itself broke under the weight of his madness. His relationship with his sisters, particularly Drusilla, crossed lines that made even jaded Romans recoil. Ancient sources claimed he lived in open incest with her, flaunting their relationship at state functions. When Drusilla died in 38 AD, Caligula declared her a goddess, made it a capital crime to laugh or bathe during the mourning period, and reportedly considered suicide himself. Some historians suggest genuine love. Others say it was one more performance of transgression, breaking Rome's deepest taboo simply because he could. The empire watched in horror as its emperor descended into depths no one could have imagined. But Caligula was only getting started. By 39 AD, Caligula's Rome had become a theater of cruelty, where the emperor was both director and lead actor. His depravities evolved from personal violations into grand spectacles designed to humiliate the entire empire. He ordered senators to run alongside his chariot for miles, their togas hiked up, their dignity shredded before jeering crowds. He made elderly patricians serve him at banquets dressed as slaves, forcing them to pour wine and clear plates while he mocked their trembling hands. But his most infamous act of degradation involved his favorite horse, Incitatus. Roman sources claim Caligula planned to make the horse a consul, Rome's highest political office. While modern historians debate whether he actually went through with it or merely threatened it as mockery, the message was clear. A horse had more value than the Senate. He housed Incitatus in a marble stable with an ivory manger, dressed it in purple blankets reserved for royalty, and invited it to dine at his table. Senators were forced to toast the horse's health, while Caligula laughed at their humiliation. The sexual violence intensified. Caligula developed a routine at his banquets. He would rise during dinner, select a guest's wife, take her to a private chamber, and return to discuss her performance while her husband sat frozen at the table. Suetonius recorded that he would then divorce or marry these women on a whim, sometimes within the same evening, treating matrimony as a game he could reset whenever bored. One senator's wife, Lolia Paulina, was married to Caligula for less than 6 months before he divorced her and forbade her from ever sleeping with another man. She lived the rest of her life in enforced celibacy, a living monument to imperial caprice. Children weren't spared. When executions were scheduled, Caligula insisted families attend. He forced parents to watch their children die, to maintain composure, even to smile during the proceedings. One senator was compelled to attend a lavish dinner party immediately after witnessing his son's execution. When the man's face betrayed his grief, Caligula mocked him publicly for being ungrateful for the emperor's hospitality. The psychological torture was deliberate. Caligula understood that breaking a man's spirit was more satisfying than merely breaking his body. His cruelty extended beyond the nobility to common Romans. During gladiatorial games, when the supply of condemned criminals ran low, Caligula ordered sections of the crowd thrown into the arena to fight wild beasts. He did this not from necessity, but from boredom, treating human lives as expendable entertainment. He once remarked that he wished Rome had a single neck so he could sever it with one blow, a statement that revealed his fundamental contempt for the people he ruled. Financial madness accompanied his moral bankruptcy. Caligula exhausted the massive treasury left by Tiberius within a year, spending on absurd projects and gifts to himself. He built a floating bridge of ships across the Bay of Naples, nearly 2 miles long, simply to prove an astrologer wrong who'd said Caligula had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the Bay of Baiae. He rode across it wearing Alexander the Great's armor, squandering resources that could have fed Rome for months. When the money ran out, Caligula turned to judicial murder. He revived treason trials, executing wealthy Romans and seizing their estates. Accusations became death sentences. One man was condemned for selling hot water in his shop. Caligula claimed it was evidence of planning to poison him. Families were destroyed overnight, their properties absorbed into the imperial treasury to fund more games, more spectacles, more monuments to Caligula's divinity. The Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers sworn to protect the emperor, watched all of this with growing alarm. Caligula had humiliated their officers, forcing Praetorian tribunes to stand guard while he violated their wives. He made them witnesses to atrocities that violated every Roman value they'd sworn to uphold. But it was his treatment of Cassius Chaerea, a respected Praetorian tribune, that sealed his fate. Chaerea was a decorated soldier, a veteran of Germanicus's campaigns, respected by his men. But Caligula delighted in mocking him, questioning his manhood, giving him deliberately obscene passwords to repeat during guard changes. He made Chaerea a constant punchline, humiliating him before the entire Praetorian corps. It was a fatal mistake. You can terrorize senators who've never held a sword, but soldiers, especially those guarding your life, require different handling. On January 24th, 41 AD, after less than 4 years in power, Caligula attended theatrical games in a covered passage beneath the palace. Cassius Chaerea, along with several conspirators, ambushed him there. They stabbed him 30 times, their blades finding every part of his body. When he fell, they continued stabbing, years of humiliation and rage channeled into each thrust. His Germanic bodyguards arrived too late. Caligula died in a pool of blood, his mouth still open in shock that someone had actually dared. The conspirators didn't stop there. They hunted down Caligula's fourth wife, Caesonia, and murdered her. They found his infant daughter, Julia Drusilla, and smashed her head against a wall. The entire bloodline had to be erased, as if eliminating his offspring could somehow cleanse Rome of what he'd done. The Senate erupted in celebration. They ordered his statues torn down, his name chiseled from monuments, his memory condemned. Damnatio memoriae, the erasure of existence. They even briefly debated restoring the Republic, ending the Principate entirely. But the Praetorian Guard had other plans. They found Caligula's uncle, Claudius, hiding behind a curtain in the palace, terrified he'd be killed too, and declared him emperor. The machine of empire ground on. Caligula's reign lasted 3 years, 10 months, and 8 days. In that time, he didn't conquer new territories or expand Rome's glory. He simply proved that absolute power, given to a mind twisted by childhood trauma and unchecked by any restraint, could transform an empire into a personal torture chamber. He showed that civilization is a thin veneer, easily stripped away by a man who understands he's untouchable. The historians who survived him, Suetonius, Cassius Dio, Josephus, recorded his atrocities in detail, though some modern scholars debate which accounts were exaggerated by successors eager to justify his murder. But the pattern is undeniable. Systematic sexual violence, calculated humiliation, the weaponization of power against the powerless. This isn't just ancient history. It's a warning written in blood on marble floors. Here on Brutal History, we don't let emperors hide behind their laurels. We dig through the palace archives, through the testimonies of survivors, through the archaeological evidence of Rome's darkest years. We remember what Caligula did, not to glorify it, but to ensure we recognize the monster when power concentrates in hands that have forgotten their humanity. Every view, every like, every subscription is a refusal to let the marble statues lie. Subscribe and keep the warning alive.